So I hate to say it, but I'm returning my Galaxy Z Flip 3. I'm sending it back to Samsung to get my money back. And in this video, I want to talk about why that is. Because originally when I got this phone, I was really excited about it. The concept of a folding phone was amazing, and after using this phone as my daily driver for the past month, I really learned a lot that you wouldn't expect when you first saw the phone, when you saw the spec sheets. Like, there's a lot of nuances that I want to talk about in this video that you probably haven't heard about. Some of these are very positive, things that no other phone that doesn't fold could do, and some of the things are definitely drawbacks, hence why I'm returning the phone in the first place. And in this video, like I said, we're gonna not really talk about the specs, and instead I kinda wanna go in like a pro-con layout, talking about features I really liked and things that I really didn't like after using this phone every single day. And as a side note to anyone new here, if you're enjoying this video, consider subscribing to see more videos like this. So let's start off with one of the positives. I mean, I think it's really cool to have a folding phone, but I mentioned that the novelty of this device wears off relatively quickly. Within a week or two, you get used to it. It's not especially exciting to have a phone that folds. But what doesn't wear off is whenever you see new people or other people that haven't seen a phone like this, because it is so rare, it kind of remains as a bit of a party trick. And so this is something that I think is really cool. It's a nice looking phone, it's a good talking point, and it's still very fascinating. It's fun to show people when they haven't seen one like this. And so aesthetics and overall just cool factor of this, very, very high. However, one of the things I didn't like about this was that, kind of a little nuance here, it doesn't have Samsung Dex. So if you're somebody that uses Samsung Dex with any other Samsung phone or tablet, getting this is going to be a letdown. It's one of the things that Samsung compromised to keep the price lower, to make things fit in here, to prevent overheating, things like that. Unfortunately, you don't have that on here. Getting back to something I really did like about this phone, a lot of people were talking about how you can prop it up and use it as a camera, and that definitely is a big positive if you want to set it up like a tripod and take some group photos, or if you want to close it and take group photos like that using the rear camera as a selfie lens. Those are both great features, but what I really liked that I kind of discovered when I lost power was that you can also use it to prop it up and set up like a flashlight. So unlike traditional glass slab phones, where if you want to use a flashlight and you're doing something, you have to shine it up at the ceiling and it like blinds you, or you kind of prop it up on something. With this phone, you can just bend it and set it like that, and it shines at whatever you're doing. That's a really subtle one, but nonetheless, I thought that was really, really interesting in a kind of a unique use for this phone. But talking more about using it in selfie mode, one of the big drawbacks with that, while it is exciting to see who is in frame, unfortunately, the aspect ratio is rotated by 90 degrees. So no matter what you're doing with this, you're going to show like a really wide photo when in fact it's a vertical photo. So you're cutting out a lot of the top and bottom of that photo, and it just doesn't quite work that well as a viewfinder for your photos, because of course, like I said, you're cropping out like 2/3 of the photo. The cover screen, however, is one of the big positives of this phone. I love having this separate display on the outside for several reasons, and I want to get into those. So first of all, looking at what the cover screen can do, and I know I said I wasn't going to get too much into specs, but I think this is really interesting. When you look at the cover screen, first of all, you can customize that to show whatever you want, whatever kind of time you want, whatever background you want in there. But then swiping over, you can set up all these different widgets. So I have music controls, I have my Next alarms, I have Galaxy Bud controls because I do have Galaxy Bud set up with this phone. I have a voice recorder, which is really nice if you just want to quickly take a voice recording. You'll be using the microphones, which are both on that side now on the bottom, and you can record, whatever music or just a little memo for your future self. You have timers, and then of course you can add other widgets as well. But a lot of people know about these widgets and they're very interesting, and people also know that you can swipe the other way to see notifications, but what a lot of people don't necessarily know is that you can swipe up from the bottom to get your Google Pay, or Samsung Pay in this case. So Samsung Pay, it allows you to just pay with the fingerprint, so you use the fingerprint on the side, and you can go and pay very, very quickly. So no longer do you have to worry about opening your phone with this to do that. Instead, it's all right on the cover screen. I think that's really cool and really convenient. Of course, swiping down from the top does give you that like kind of little quick settings there to change the brightness or to mute your phone. And kind of playing off that a little bit further, having a phone that opens and closes, again, as I mentioned in a previous video, makes it a little bit more deliberate. Like, the barrier to use your phone is slightly higher, which can be both a positive and negative. I found in some ways it was definitely positive, being that I was far less likely to get distracted by notifications. So when I look at the cover screen and I see a notification, I have like a kind of little split-second decision in my brain. Do I want to open my phone and engage with that, or do I just want to let it go? Versus if my phone is just a glass slab, you're much more tempted to engage with every single notification, and you're more likely to get distracted. So from a productivity standpoint, the cover screen and the folding phone was definitely a positive. But switching over to a drawback, the downside of that, of course, is that this phone is not really set for one-handed use. So anybody with any type of mobility issues or disabilities, this would obviously be like not the best phone for you. But even for most other people, having to open your phone with two hands is a little bit more cumbersome. You can't just flip it open. You can't, like, you can kind of get it open with one hand, but it ends up being real awkward. It doesn't feel very normal. So I found that in many cases, like this was not something I expected. I found that in many cases, I actually would have a tendency to leave my phone open and put it in my pocket like this, which definitely works. And you can do that. Like, it's kind of a nice versatility with this phone. You can have it open or closed. I mean, you don't always have to close it. I don't know why people think you do, but the drawback, of course, is that the screen is relatively prone to scratches. So I highly recommend closing it when you can, but if you don't want to, if you're just setting on your desk, you don't obviously have to close it all the time. And talking about the vulnerability of the display, another big positive of having a phone that folds like this is that it's much more protected. I'm not worried about the keys in my pocket scratching my screen. I'm not worried about having to get a screen protector because it's always closed in like that. Unfortunately, in your pockets, while I'm not worried about keys, going back to one of the negatives here, I am worried about having sand or anything else in my pocket, like wood chips or sawdust, stuff like that. Like, things just end up in your pocket and they could definitely damage this phone. It is, of course, IPX8 water resistant, and we know that's a big positive, but lacking dust resistance, it just made me always a little bit more paranoid about using this. Whenever I open and close it, I listen really closely to see if there's any kind of like gritty sound, and obviously there always is a sound to the hinge, which a lot of times just made me a little nervous that there was something wrong with that. But none of these are the reasons I'm returning this phone. I'm gonna get to that in a second because unfortunately there was one fatal flaw, well, kind of two fatal flaws that made me decide to stop using this phone. Before we get into that, one of the other things I really liked about this phone was the fact that you can have kind of a separate top and bottom of the phone. So unlike a traditional glass slab phone where the wireless charging is in the middle, here it's on the bottom, which means that you can have like a pop socket on the top if you wanted to hold your phone or mount it in a car, or you can actually get a case that has like a nice little ring in the middle, again, for holding your phone, making it more grippable, because it is a very tall, narrow phone. So it already is a little bit more grippable than the wider ones, but still, larger devices, it is sometimes nice to have something in the back, especially for anybody with smaller hands. And not having to compromise or decide between wireless charging and having a grip on the back, like being able to have both on here, I think is a really big positive. I also really appreciate how much thought Samsung actually put into this device. So one of the ways you can really see this is in the volume controls. When the phone is open, pressing on the bottom part of this button, or the part closest to the hinge, turns the volume down. But when you close it, because the display is this way, the volume buttons are switched. And it makes sense because when you press on the top of this, which again is closest to the hinge, rather than being volume down, it's now volume up, which is much more intuitive and it just feels more natural. So I love how they adjusted the volume buttons based on if this is open or closed, they perform opposite, and it works in a much more natural and user-friendly way. Some interesting little things I noticed with this, it does use magnets to hold itself closed. So if you have other metal items in your pocket, or if you set this on a metal table, the magnets do interact with other things. So it might be like sticking to your table a little bit, it might slide around or do different things. For the most part, this is not a drawback, it's not a problem at all, but it was something that I thought was interesting and I just figured I would share in this video. And although I really like having two halves of the phone where one has wireless charging and the other has space for some type of pop socket or something, a drawback here is that you don't have room to have a credit card or ID on this phone. You can't put a wallet on here because it's just too small. Now, you can also perceive that as a positive. The phone is definitely very compact, so if you have shallower pockets, I mean, that's one of the big selling points of this phone in the first place. In a way, it kind of competes directly with the iPhone mini, being more pocketable, but the advantage of this is that it opens up and has a much, much larger display. Now, all of these are both good and bad throughout this video. There's a lot of things that you might expect or might not expect, and most of these I was okay with. I could definitely get by with any of these, and the phone would be totally usable. Like I said, I really wanted to like this phone and use it for the next year. But the drawbacks I found came with these two main things. The first thing, which I was kind of okay with, but it was definitely a struggle, is the battery life. The battery life on this is really terrible. I found that on most days, under pretty normal use, I start my day at around 6 o'clock in the morning, and by 4 p.m. the battery is completely dead. Which means that if I have a long day of traveling or just a regular day in general and I don't have a wireless charging pad in front of me, then the phone is definitely going to die and not make it through a whole day. Now, if you have wireless charging pads around, as I have at my desk, I was able to charge it and, definitely get through a day, but you're always looking for chargers. I kind of felt that old stress that I thought I got away from when I ditched my Pixel 4. And that was that no matter what, your phone always seems to be at like 25 or 30%, and you're just always looking for the next charger. That was a drawback with this, and it was definitely a struggle to get through a day, and I think a lot of people would really dislike that about this device. But unfortunately, the reason I have to get rid of this device, the reason I'm sending it back to Samsung might be a little bit more of an anomaly. It might not happen to all devices, but it does make me question the longevity and the durability of this device. Now, I trust that Samsung probably tested the folding of this phone thousands and thousands of times, but I still question the durability of the tiny cables that go and connect the bottom to the top half of this phone. If you look at what components are under the hood here, the top half has a lot of the brains, the processor, and a lot of things like that. So for the most part, you don't have a lot of communication between the top and bottom of this phone. The bottom is mostly the battery and the wireless charging, so that is not really the concern. But what does communicate with the bottom is the microphone. Now, the microphone is actually the issue I had here. The microphone completely stopped working on the bottom of this phone. So at first, when I was using this, I noticed that people would not be able to hear me when I was on a phone call. I turned off Bluetooth, I reset the phone, I tried everything I could, and people just could never hear me when I was talking on the phone. And when I tried to really dig into this, I took a video, and well, the video sounded like this.
Blah, 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 video, talking, video. Testing the microphone.
So to really illustrate this problem, I went into Pro Video mode on the Z Flip 3 right here, and you can see down on the left side, it shows us our levels for each microphone. And right now, it is entirely left, which is the top microphone, and the right microphone, as you can see there, is not showing anything at all. When you record a video, sometimes you hear buzzing, and sometimes the phone knows to compensate, and it only uses the left microphone. So as you can see, the microphone on the bottom is not working. Maybe there's an issue with the microphone itself, the actual unit on the bottom, or maybe that's something related to the cable connecting the bottom to the top. I'm not entirely sure which one it is, but it does make me question the durability of this phone. When I talked to Samsung customer service, they had no solution and told me I should send it back. So I'm going to end up sending this phone back regardless. They asked if I wanted a new one, if I wanted my money back. Unfortunately, I said I would rather just have my money back because, like I said, I'm not entirely sure about the durability of this phone. It's still such a new concept, a new design out there, but really one of the big issues that kept me from asking for a replacement was that 1-2 punch. Between that issue and the battery life, it just wasn't worth it for me to be using this phone, and I would rather switch back to either my Galaxy S21 Plus, or maybe I'll be switching back to a Pixel 6 whenever that phone comes out. So let me know what your thoughts are on the Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 3. Do you have one? Are you getting one? And what do you think about this phone in general? Personally, I was really excited to see it, but I'm going to wait another year until the next generation comes out, and I'll give it another shot then. But for now, I think this phone is really just meant for early adopters, and even then, it has its hiccups. So if you enjoyed this video, as always, consider liking and subscribing. I'm Mike O'Brien. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.